At 11:23 a.m. on September 17, 1944, Private First Class Eddie Kowalski huddled inside his Sherman tank on the outskirts of the French village of Arour. Barely 400 yards away, a Panzer IV loomed into view, its turret swiveling to lock onto their position. Disaster had already struck the Sherman's crew. Their gunner lay dead, their commander wounded. And Kowalski, he was just the loader, never trained to man the 75mm cannon, never taught to aim it in combat, not even once. The Panzer fired first. The shells screamed past so close that the Sherman jolted sideways, metal groaning. Copper flooded Kowalski's mouth, the taste of fear and adrenaline, and his ears rang so loudly he could barely think. The turret reeked of cordite and blood. Lieutenant Carson, his commander, slouched against the radio, pressing a blood-soaked field dressing to his shoulder. He locked eyes with Kowalski and spat out one word: "Shoot!" Kowalski scrambled into the gunner's seat, his hands shaking so violently he could barely grip the controls. Through the periscope, he watched the Panzer reloading, maybe 20 seconds until its next shot. Army doctrine drilled into every tanker's head was clear: aim for the lower hull, take out the tracks, immobilize the enemy. But trees blocked Kowalski's view of the Panzer's hull. All he could see was its turret. To make matters worse, the Sherman's gun sight was calibrated for ranges between 600 and 2,000 yards. At 400 yards, it was useless, too close for the optics to focus on anything below the enemy's upper turret. He would have to guess. Aim by feel, aim blind. His foot nudged something on the turret floor. A shattered 5-inch hand mirror split down the middle. It had belonged to Corporal Hayes, their dead gunner, used for checking his teeth after rations, for shaving in the field, for anything but combat. Nothing tactical, nothing useful, just a silly broken mirror. Kowalski grabbed it, the Panzer's gun barrel leveled. 10 seconds, maybe less. Kowalski's vision tunneled. His breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. He held the mirror above the periscope at an angle, then peered through the gun sight. The reflection flipped the view. Lower, much lower. Suddenly, he could see the Panzer's hull, the driver's viewport, the critical weak point where the armor was a mere 50 millimeters thick. He adjusted the mirror, aligning the crosshairs dead on target. Kowalski squeezed the firing button. The 75mm cannon roared, filling the turret with acrid smoke. The tank lurched backward from the recoil. When the smoke cleared, the Panzer sat motionless, black smoke billowing from its driver's hatch. One shot, one kill. Carson stared at him, the dressing on his shoulder now soaked through. "What the hell did you just do?" he whispered. Kowalski didn't answer, because 2 more Panzers had crested the ridgeline, and they were closer. 300 yards, maybe less. Both turrets were turning toward the Sherman. Both guns were loaded. Both were ready to fire. Kowalski still clutched the broken mirror in his hand. What happened next wasn't in any training manual, not even close. The Battle of Arras had ignited 3 days earlier, on September 14, 1944. General Patton's Third Army had blazed into France, charging east toward the German border at a reckless pace. Too fast, some argued. Supply lines stretched thin. Fuel ran scarce. But Patton didn't care about logistics. He cared about momentum. The Germans cared about stopping him. Near Arras, the 5th Panzer Army massed its forces, over 200 tanks, including Panthers, Panzerfaust, and Tigers, the cream of Germany's remaining armor in the West. Their mission was brutal and straightforward: destroy the American spearhead, sever Patton's advance, and hurl the Allies back across the Moselle River. The Americans countered with the 4th Armored Division, equipped mostly with M4A1 Sherman tanks, each armed with a 75mm cannon. Shermans were reliable workhorses, great for infantry support and easy to maintain. But they were never built for head-to-head tank duels, especially not against Panthers. The numbers told a grim story. A Panther weighed 45 tons, a Sherman just 33. The Panther's frontal armor was 80 millimeters thick, sloped at a 55-degree angle to deflect incoming fire. The Sherman's front armor? A paltry 51 millimeters. A Panther could punch through a Sherman's hull from 2,000 yards away. A Sherman had to close to within 500 yards just to dent a Panther's front plate. The math was merciless. In Normandy, American tank crews learned that lesson in blood. 5 Shermans lost for every single Panther destroyed. Sometimes worse, German tankers mocked the Sherman as the Tommy Cooker. Because they burned so easily, their ammunition racks detonating with terrifying regularity, leaving crews with almost no chance to escape. American tankers had their own nickname for it. Ronson, after the cigarette lighter. Lights first time, every time. Eddie Kowalski knew the statistics. Every loader in the 4th Armored did. Since crossing the Moselle, the division had already lost 47 Shermans. Kowalski's tank, call sign Bad News, had survived 6 engagements. By pure luck, mostly. They'd only ever hit Panthers from the side or the rear, never head-on, never at 400 yards, never with a loader behind the gun, until today. The problem wasn't just inferior armor, it was visibility. The Sherman's gun sight worked flawlessly at standard combat ranges, 600 to 2,500 yards. But at close range, under 400 yards, it hit a deadly blind spot. The sight couldn't depress low enough to target the enemy's hull. Gunners could only see the upper turret where armor was thickest. Shooting a Panther's turret from the front was suicide. The 75mm shell would bounce right off. Tankers called this the dead zone. Too close to aim properly, too far to ram. Doctrine said to reverse, gain distance, find a better angle, call for backup. But Kowalski couldn't reverse. The 2 Panzers on the ridge were 300 yards out. Backing up would expose the Sherman's thin side armor to their cannons. Staying still meant being bracketed. 1 shot from the left, 1 from the right. No escape. Carson's radio crackled to life. Battalion headquarters demanding a status report. The lieutenant didn't answer. He was too busy watching Kowalski hold a broken hand mirror above the gun sight like it was some kind of magic charm. The lead Panzer fired. The shell landed 20 yards short, churning up dirt and smoke, a ranging shot. The next one would hit dead center. Kowalski had 8 seconds, maybe less. He angled the mirror, eyes locked on the reflection. Through the gun sight, he saw the Panzer's lower hull materialize. The driver's viewport, a 12-inch or steel rectangle. Hit that, and the 75mm shell would punch straight into the crew compartment. He fired. The Panzer erupted. Not just smoke, fire. Its front end peeled open like a crushed soda can. The driver's hatch blew off and flames shot 30 feet into the sky. Kowalski had hit the ammunition storage. The tank burned so hot that the paint on its turret bubbled and blackened. 2 kills, 2 minutes. The 3rd Panzer spun to retreat. Kowalski didn't let it get away. He tracked it through the mirror, adjusting the angle as the tank pulled back. 400 yards, 420, 450. The Panzer was trying to escape the dead zone, to reach a range where its own sights worked. Kowalski fired again. The shell slammed into the Panzer's engine deck. The tank shuddered, lurched forward 10 yards, then died. Black smoke poured from its grills. The crew bailed out, sprinting for the tree line. Kowalski watched them go. He didn't fire again. They weren't a threat anymore. 3 Panzers, 4 minutes, with a broken hand mirror. Carson grabbed the radio, his voice shaking. "Battalion, this is bad news. 3 enemy tanks destroyed. All 3 confirmed kills." The radio went silent. Then, "Say again, bad news. Did you say 3? "Affirmative. 3 Panzer IVs. 4 minutes." Another pause. "Bad news. What's your crew status?" Carson looked at Kowalski, looked at the mirror still clutched in his hand, looked at the burning wrecks on the ridge. He said, "Battalion, you wouldn't believe me if I told you." But word spread fast. By that afternoon, every tank commander in the 4th Armored Division was asking about the miracle at Arayur. How a loader with 0 gunnery training had taken out 3 German tanks in 4 minutes. How he'd done it in the dead zone, with a sight that wasn't designed for close range. How he'd done it with a 5-inch hand mirror. What they didn't know yet was how bad the dead zone problem really was, and how quickly their newfound trick would turn into a matter of life and death. The dead zone wasn't a new problem. American tankers had been complaining about it since Normandy. Every commander knew the fatal flaw. At ranges under 400 yards, the M4 Sherman's gun sight couldn't tilt low enough to target the vulnerable parts of enemy tanks. The driver's viewport, the lower glacis plate, the spots where armor was thin enough to penetrate. The Sherman's periscope sat high in the turret. The gun barrel sat low. At long range, the geometry balanced out. At close range, it failed catastrophically. Gunners were shooting blind, guessing where the hull might be, hoping for a lucky hit. Most never got lucky. In July 1944, a Sherman platoon from the 2nd Armored Division ran into 3 Panthers near St. Lo, at a range of 300 yards. The Shermans never got off a single shot. All 5 tanks were destroyed in 90 seconds. The Panthers fired from hull-down positions, their turrets the only visible targets. The Sherman gunners aimed where they thought the hulls were. Every shot bounced or missed entirely. In August near Mortagne, another slaughter unfolded. 4 Shermans against 2 Panzer IVs, 250 yards apart. The Shermans charged, trying to flank the Germans. Only one made it. The other 3 burned. The problem was simple. By the time you got close enough to hit a tank's side, you'd already entered the dead zone. And in the dead zone, the enemy could see you perfectly. You couldn't see them at all. Staff Sergeant Mike Diageo, a gunner from the 3rd Armored Division, tried something different. He brought a tiny dentist's mirror into his Sherman, a small circular glass mounted on a swivel handle. He held it at different angles while his loader called out what he saw through the periscope, hoping to reflect the lower battlefield into view. It almost worked, but the mirror was too small, offering a mere 20-degree field of view, not enough to track a moving target. 2 days later, Diageo's tank was hit. He survived, barely, burns covering his hands and face. He spent 3 weeks in a field hospital. When he came back, he left the dentist's mirror behind. The 4th Armored Division tried a more official fix. They requested expedited delivery of the new M4A3 Sherman model, which had a lower-mounted periscope, better angles, and improved close-range visibility. Division headquarters submitted the request in August. The answer came back in September. Current production allocated to priority theaters. Estimated delivery, December 1944. 4 months away. The Battle of Ariour was happening now. On September 16th, 16 hours before Eddie Kowalski picked up that broken mirror, Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commanding officer of the 37th Tank Battalion, called an emergency meeting. Every tank commander in the battalion attended. Abrams laid out the grim situation. The 5th Panzer Army was pushing hard, and engagement ranges were getting shorter, 200 yards, sometimes less. The fighting was shifting to villages and forests, where long-range gunnery was useless. "We need to figure this out now," Abrams said, his voice sharp, "because if we don't, we're going to lose half our tanks before we reach the German border." One commander suggested backing up whenever possible, staying out of the dead zone at all costs. Abrams shook his head. "Patton doesn't back up. Neither do we." Another proposed focusing solely on ambush tactics, hitting the enemy from the side, avoiding frontal fights entirely. "That works until it doesn't," Abrams countered. "What happens when they see you first?" Nobody had an answer. The meeting adjourned at 4:30 p.m. 16 hours later, Eddie Kowalski solved the problem they couldn't. But first he had to survive the night, because the Germans weren't finished with Ariour. Not by a long shot, and the dead zone was about to get a lot more dangerous. At 11:40 a.m., Lieutenant Carson radioed battalion headquarters again, this time describing the impossible. 3 Panzers destroyed in 4 minutes, a loader using a hand mirror to aim. The response was immediate. "Hold position. Don't move. Battalion commander is en route." 30 minutes later, Lieutenant Colonel Abrams arrived. He climbed up onto Bad News and peered into the turret. Kowalski was still sitting in the gunner's seat, the broken mirror resting on his lap. Abrams picked it up, turning it over in his hands. 5 inches across, split down the middle. Nothing tactical about it, nothing special, just a piece of broken glass. "Show me," Abrams said. Kowalski positioned himself at the gun sight, holding the mirror above the periscope at a 45-degree angle. The reflection showed the ground 300 yards away. Clear, sharp, lower than the periscope's direct view. Abrams watched, his expression unreadable. "Again," he said, slower this time. "How do you know where to aim?" Abrams asked. "Same as always," Kowalski said. "The crosshairs, but I watch the reflection, not the direct view." "And the angle? How do you adjust for different ranges?" Trial and error. 300 yards needs about 40 degrees. 400 needs 35. I just tilt until the hull's in the center of the sight picture. Abrams went quiet. He stared at the 3 burning panzers on the ridge, then at the mirror, then at Kowalski. How long did it take you to figure this out? About 5 seconds, Kowalski said. Right before the first panzer was going to kill us. Abrams climbed down from the tank. He waved over the 12 other tank commanders, all within shouting distance. He held up the broken mirror for everyone to see. This loader just solved our dead zone problem with this, he said. One commander laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. Sir, that's a shaving mirror. Abrams didn't smile. That shaving mirror killed 3 panzers in 4 minutes, from the front, at ranges where your gun sights don't work. Now shut up and pay attention. He ordered Kowalski to demonstrate the technique again, this time for the entire group. The loader showed them how to grip the mirror. 2 fingers on the edge, thumb on the back. How to angle it, like checking your teeth but tilted down 40 degrees. How to keep one hand on the gun controls while adjusting the mirror with the other. It looked awkward. It looked improvised. It looked ridiculous. But the burning wrecks on the ridge proved it worked. One commander raised a hand. What about the field of view? That mirror's tiny. You don't need a wide view, Kowalski said. You just need to see the hull. That's it. The mirror shows about 30 degrees, enough to track one target. Another asked, what if the mirror breaks? What if it falls? Then we're back to square one, blind in the dead zone. Abrams cut in, his voice decisive. Every tank in this battalion will have a mirror by tonight. I don't care if you steal them from medics. I don't care if you break into French houses and take them off bathroom walls. Every gunner gets one. Every loader carries a backup. The commanders dispersed. Within 2 hours, the 4th Armored Division launched a full-scale mirror collection operation. Tankers streamed into Areor village, knocking on doors, offering cigarettes, chocolate, and cash for any mirror larger than 4 inches. Some villagers refused, but most didn't. They'd seen the German tanks, knew the Americans were fighting to free them. By dusk, 47 Shermans had mirrors mounted or taped near their gun sights. But having a mirror and knowing how to use it were 2 very different things. The angle had to be perfect, too steep, and you saw nothing but dirt, too shallow, and you saw only sky. You had to hold it steady while the tank jolted over rough terrain, while enemy shells exploded nearby, while your hands shook with adrenaline. It was a delicate dance, like patting your head and rubbing your stomach while someone shot at you. Kowalski spent the afternoon training other loaders. He taught them the grip, the angle, the trick of tracking targets through the reflection. Some picked it up fast, others struggled. Private Ray Hollis, a young loader from Georgia, asked, "What if I can't hold it steady?" "Tape it down," Kowalski said, "but you'll lose the ability to adjust angles. Works for static defense, useless if you're moving." By evening, 20 loaders had practiced the technique. It was clunky, it was risky, but it worked. That was the only thing that mattered. At 6 p.m., German artillery opened fire. Shells whistled overhead, slamming into the ground around Aurora. The barrage lasted 30 minutes. When it stopped, the radio crackled to life. German armor spotted moving south. Multiple contacts, at least a dozen tanks. Range, 1,200 yards and closing fast. Abrams gave the order. All tanks hold position. Let them come to us. The Germans advanced, mostly Panthers, moving cautiously, expecting the Americans to open fire at long range, like always. But the 4th Armored held their fire, waited, watched the range tick down. 1,100 yards, 900, 700, still waiting. At 500 yards, the German tankers realized something was wrong. They stopped advancing, started to turn, searching for cover. Too late. "Open fire!" Abrams yelled over the radio. 17 Shermans fired simultaneously, not at turrets, at hulls, because now they could see them, through mirrors, through reflections, through a technique that didn't exist 24 hours earlier. 11 Panthers were destroyed in the first minute. The rest retreated at full speed. The 4th Armored didn't lose a single tank. It was a miracle, a victory born of desperation and a broken mirror. But nobody anticipated the flaw in the trick, a flaw that almost got Eddie Kowalski killed the next morning. The flaw revealed itself at dawn on September 18th. Kowalski sat in the gunner's seat of bad news, mirror positioned, ready for whatever came next. A lone Panzer IV appeared 300 yards away, perfect range for the mirror technique. Kowalski angled the glass, locked onto the Panzer's hull through the reflection, and squeezed the firing button. The shell missed. Not by inches, by yards. It slammed into the ground 20 feet to the left of the Panzer, sending dirt and grass flying. The Panzer fired back immediately. The shell hit Bad News's front plate, penetrating 3 inches before the armor finally stopped it. The tank lurched violently. Kowalski's head slammed into the gun sight. Blood streamed from his nose. He fired again. Another miss, this time 20 feet to the right. The Panzer was stationary, a sitting duck at 300 yards, but Kowalski couldn't hit it. "What's wrong?" Lieutenant Carson yelled, his voice strained. Kowalski didn't know. The mirror showed the hull clearly. The crosshairs were dead on. Everything looked perfect, but the shots were going wide. He adjusted the mirror angle, fired a third time. The shell landed 50 yards short, skipping off the ground like a stone on water. The Panzer advanced, now 250 yards away. Kowalski could see the German commander's head poking out of the turret hatch. Close enough to see the man's face. Close enough to die. He fired a fourth time. The shell screamed over the Panzer's turret, slamming into the trees beyond. Carson grabbed the radio, panic in his voice. "All tanks, we've got a problem. The mirror isn't working." But it was working for everyone else. 2 other Shermans opened fire on the same Panzer. Both hits. The tank shuddered, smoke pouring from its engine deck. The crew bailed out, sprinting for safety. Kowalski watched them go, confused and furious. Those gunners used mirrors too. Why couldn't he hit the target? Then he looked at his mirror. Really looked at it. The crack down the middle had widened overnight, the 2 halves now sitting at a slightly different angles. When light hit the glass, it didn't reflect one image, it reflected 2. The crosshairs in his gun sight lined up with the left reflection, but the actual target was where the right reflection showed it. The crack was splitting his aim, throwing his shots off by yards at combat range. Kowalski grabbed a roll of adhesive tape from the ammo rack, wrapping it tightly around the mirror's edges, yanking the 2 halves back together. The crack didn't disappear, but the reflections merged mostly. He tested it on a tree stump 400 yards away, lining up the crosshairs and firing. The shell hit 2 feet to the left of the stump. Better. Not perfect, but better. He didn't know the physics behind it, but he understood the problem. A flat mirror gave 1 accurate reflection. A cracked mirror gave multiple, each slightly offset. Even a 1/4 degree tilt translated to yards of error at 300 yards. And if his mirror was cracked, others would be too. Under the stress of combat, the recoil of the 75mm cannon, the jolting of the tank, the constant vibration, glass would break. He radioed the other tanks immediately. "Check your mirrors. If they're cracked, replace them now." 3 tanks reported cracks. 2 had already noticed accuracy problems. They'd blamed it on nerves, on bad luck. It wasn't luck. It was broken glass creating false reflections. Lieutenant Colonel Abrams issued new orders right away. Every mirror had to be inspected before combat. Any crack, any chip, any imperfection meant immediate replacement. Loaders carried backup mirrors. Commanders carried spares. Some tanks mounted 2 mirrors side by side, switching between them if one failed. But mirrors were fragile. Glass breaks, especially in the chaos of a tank turret. Every shot from the 75mm cannon shook the turret violently. Spent shell casings clanged off metal surfaces. If a mirror wasn't secured perfectly, it would crack within minutes. Some loaders tried steel mirrors, polished metal instead of glass. More durable, harder to break, but the reflection was dimmer, fuzzier. You could see the enemy's hull, but not clearly enough to spot weak points. Others tried acrylic mirrors, lightweight plastic, nearly unbreakable, but acrylic scratched easily. Gun smoke left a residue that couldn't be wiped away without damaging the surface. After 3 engagements, the reflection was so cloudy, the mirror was useless. Glass remained the best option. Clear, accurate, reliable, but fragile. Carson looked at Kowalski, at his taped-together mirror. "How long before every mirror in this division cracks?" Kowalski stared at the distorted reflection. "Maybe a week, maybe less if we keep fighting." "Then what?" "Then we're back where we started," Kowalski said. blind in the dead zone. Abrams knew this too. He sent a message to division headquarters, begging for proper equipment, adjustable periscopes, angled sights, anything engineered for close-range combat. The response came back within hours. No modifications available. Use field expedient solutions. Translation: you're on your own. And the field expedient solution was breaking. Literally. Worse, the Germans were learning. They noticed the Americans fighting differently, engaging at close range, hitting weak points with uncanny accuracy. German tank commanders started changing their tactics. They stopped advancing into the dead zone, instead engaging from 600, 700, 800 yards, ranges where the mirror technique didn't matter, ranges where Panthers had every advantage. On September 19th, the 4th Armored Division lost 8 Shermans, not because the mirror technique failed, but because the Germans never let them get close enough to use it. The innovation that saved Kowalski's life was becoming obsolete. 3 days after he discovered it, 3 days after it had spread through the division, the window was closing. And then Kowalski realized something worse, something nobody had considered. The mirrors weren't just fragile, they were visible. German gunners could see loaders holding mirrors above periscopes. They could see the glint of reflected sunlight. They could identify which Shermans were using the new technique, and they started targeting those tanks first. At 10:15 a.m. on September 20th, Private Ray Hollis sat in his Sherman 3 miles east of Aurora. He'd practiced the mirror technique for 2 days straight, felt confident, ready. A Panther appeared 350 yards away, moving slowly through an orchard. Hollis positioned his mirror, angled it correctly, watched the reflection reveal the Panther's lower hull. The Panther fired first, not at the Sherman's center mass, but at the turret, specifically at the periscope where Hollis held the mirror. The shell hit 6 inches above the periscope, peeling open the turret roof like a tin can. Shrapnel filled the interior. Hollis died instantly. So did his commander. The driver barely managed to bail out. 2 hours later, it happened again. Another Sherman, another loader holding a mirror, another German shell aimed precisely at the periscope. This crew was luckier. The shell missed by 2 feet, but the message was clear. The Germans were targeting the mirrors. They were targeting the loaders holding them. By afternoon, the 4th Armored realized what was happening. German tank commanders were using binoculars to scan American formations, looking for telltale signs. A loader's hand above a periscope, a glint of sunlight off glass. When they spotted it, they aimed high. For the turret, not the hull, trying to kill the loader before he could aim. And it was working. Abrams called another meeting. The mood was nothing like the optimism of 3 days earlier. Back then, they'd had an edge. Now that edge was dulling fast. The Germans know, Abrams said. They're watching for mirrors. They're shooting loaders. One commander spoke up, his voice tight. Do we stop using them? Go back to being blind under 400 yards? No, Abrams said, but we adapt. But adaptation wasn't easy. The mirror had to be visible to work. You had to hold it where it could catch light, reflect the battlefield, show the gun sight what it needed to see. Any position that did that made the mirror visible to enemy observers. Some crews tried a new tactic. Keep the mirror hidden until the enemy was close, then raise it, aim, fire, fast. It worked once, maybe twice, but combat wasn't that clean. Targets moved, ranges changed. You needed time to adjust the mirror angle, to find the reflection, to line up the shot. Rushing meant missing, and missing meant dying. Other crews tried painting their mirrors flat black to reduce the glint of sunlight. This helped slightly, but black paint dimmed the reflection, making it harder to see targets, especially in low light or through smoke. You traded visibility to the enemy for visibility of the enemy. It was a bad trade. Staff Sergeant Mike Diageo, the gunner who'd tried the dentist's mirror back in August, had a different idea. He suggested mounting mirrors inside the turret permanently, fixed at a set angle, calibrated for a specific range, 350 yards, for example. No hand-holding, no visible movement, just a permanent optical modification that enemy observers couldn't spot. Abrams liked the idea. He ordered battalion maintenance crews to experiment, pulling 5 Shermans out of rotation to test fixed mirrors at various angles. The results were mixed. Fixed mirrors worked perfectly at their calibrated range, accurate within 6 inches at 350 yards, but at 300 yards they aimed too high, at 400 yards too low. Fixed angles couldn't adapt to the chaos of combat, where ranges changed in seconds. Handheld mirrors remain more versatile, adjustable, capable of handling any range in the dead zone. But they were visible, targetable, deadly for the loader holding them. The 4th Armored was stuck. Use handheld mirrors and risk getting shot, use fixed mirrors and sacrifice versatility, or abandon mirrors entirely and fight blind. Carson looked at Kowalski, at his taped, cracked mirror. "What do you think?" Kowalski turned the mirror over in his hands. "It's still cracked, still taped, still working, barely." He thought about Hollis, about the shell that had torn through his turret. It could have been bad news. It could have been him. "The Germans are killing us anyway," he said. "At least with the mirror, I can fight back." That night, Abrams made a decision. The 4th Armored would keep using handheld mirrors, but with strict new protocols. Loaders would only raise mirrors when absolutely necessary, when engagement was imminent, when there was no other option. The rest of the time, stay low, stay hidden. Don't give German gunners an easy target. It was a compromise, not a solution, but it kept the technique alive. For 3 more days, the 4th Armored fought using mirror-assisted gunnery. They destroyed 41 German tanks, lost 19 of their own. Better than the old kill ratio, not as good as those first miraculous engagements when the Germans didn't know what to look for. By September 23rd, the Battle of Arroyo was winding down. The 5th Panzer Army withdrew. Too many losses, too much resistance. Patton's advance continued east. The 4th Armored pushed toward the German border. The dead zone problem persisted, but it was manageable now. Crews knew the mirror technique, knew its limitations, knew when to use it, and when to rely on other tactics. Eddie Kowalski survived. So did bad news. They fought through France, into Germany, all the way to Czechoslovakia. Kowalski kept his cracked mirror the entire time. Taped and retaped, scratched and cloudy, but functional. It saved his life 4 more times before the war ended. But the mirror technique never became standard doctrine. It never made it into training manuals. It never received official recognition from the Ordnance Department. It remained a field expedient solution, improvised, temporary, forgotten by everyone except the men who used it, until 50 years later, when a historian found Lieutenant Carson's after-action report buried in the National Archives. Carson's report sat in a filing cabinet at 3rd Army headquarters for 6 months. Nobody read it, not unusual. Thousands of after-action reports flooded in daily during the final months of the war. Battles, engagements, skirmishes, each documented, each filed, most never analyzed. In March 1945, a young captain named Robert Hayes was assigned to compile lessons learned from armored combat in Europe. He read through hundreds of reports looking for patterns, for innovations, for anything that might improve doctrine for future conflicts. He found Carson's report on page 417 of a stack that reached his shoulder. The report described the mirror technique in detail, with diagrams, testimonials from 12 tank commanders, and hard statistics. Between September 17th and October 3rd, 1944, the 4th Armored Division destroyed 87 German tanks using mirror-assisted gunnery, losing 31 Shermans in the same period. A kill ratio of nearly 3-to-1, better than any other American armored division in France at the time. Hayes forwarded the report to the Ordnance Department with a strong recommendation. Investigate the technique, develop purpose-built optical equipment, issue it to all armored divisions, standard equipment, not field expedient, not improvised, engineered. The Ordnance Department's response came back in April 1945. Interesting, but impractical. Close-range tank combat is becoming obsolete. Future doctrine emphasizes long-range gunnery and air support. No development recommended. The war in Europe ended 3 weeks later. The report went back into the filing cabinet. Hayes moved on to other projects. The mirror technique died with the war, but a few tankers remembered. Kowalski remembered. He kept his cracked mirror after mustering out in November 1945, bringing it home to Pittsburgh, stashing it in a shoebox in his basement. He didn't talk about it much, didn't think anyone would care. He was right. Nobody cared in 1945. Nobody cared in 1950. Not even during the Korean War when American tanks fought in close terrain again, in villages and rice paddies where long-range gunnery was useless. The M26 Pershing and M46 Patton tanks had better sights than the Sherman, better optics, better depression angles. The dead zone problem was reduced, not eliminated, but nobody thought about mirrors. In 1973, a military historian named Dr. James Whitmore started researching small unit innovations during World War II. Not the big stuff, like radar or the atomic bomb, but the little things. Field modifications, improvised solutions that soldiers created when official equipment failed. He found Carson's report by accident while researching something else entirely. He read it 3 times, couldn't believe it. American tank crews had solved a critical gunnery problem with bathroom mirrors, and nobody had documented it beyond one lieutenant's after-action report. Whitmore tracked down surviving members of the 4th Armored Division, 12 men who'd used the mirror technique. 8 agreed to interviews. Kowalski was one of them. By then, he was 51 years old, a machinist with 3 kids, rarely talking about the war. Whitmore asked him why the technique never became standard doctrine. "Because it was stupid," Kowalski said. "A hand mirror. Who's going to put that in a manual?" He paused, then added, "It worked because we were desperate, because we didn't have anything better." You think the Army wants to admit their equipment was so bad that soldiers needed bathroom mirrors to fight? Whitmore published his findings in a military history journal in 1976. A small circulation, maybe 3,000 readers. The article mentioned the mirror technique in 2 paragraphs. Noting it as an interesting footnote, nothing more. It didn't change anything. Tank doctrine continued evolving. Better optics, better fire control systems, computer-assisted targeting. By the 1980s, the M1 Abrams tank could engage targets accurately at any range, any angle. The dead zone didn't exist anymore. Not for American tanks. But the principle remained relevant. Improvisation, adaptation, solving critical problems with whatever materials were available when official solutions didn't exist or arrived too late. That lesson mattered. That lesson still matters. In 1994, Eddie Kowalski died of a heart attack at 72 years old. His son found the shoebox in the basement while cleaning out the house. Opened it, found the cracked mirror, held together with yellowed tape. He didn't know what it was, didn't know its history. He threw it away. The mirror that killed 3 Panzers in 4 minutes ended up in a Pittsburgh landfill. But the story survived. Whitmore's article was referenced in other books, other articles, other documentaries. Not often, not prominently, but enough that the mirror technique didn't disappear entirely from history. In 2008, a military blogger found Carson's original report digitized in the National Archives online database, posted it online. The story went viral, sort of, within military history circles. People were fascinated not by the technical details, but by the desperation, the innovation, the fact that American soldiers had defeated superior German armor with something as mundane as a bathroom mirror. The blogger's post ended with a question nobody had asked before. How many other innovations like this existed? How many other field expedients worked, saved lives, but never made it into the official record? The answer, discovered through years of subsequent research, was shocking. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Field expedient innovations that worked, that saved lives, but were lost to history because nobody wrote them down, because reports got filed and forgotten, because the soldiers who invented them died before anyone asked. Researchers found evidence of other optical modifications. Tank crews in Italy used shaving cream on periscopes to reduce glare. Crews in France mounted multiple mirrors at different angles, creating crude rangefinders. One crew in Belgium allegedly used a lady's compact mirror with a built-in light, though this remained unconfirmed. But mirrors weren't the only innovation. Tankers welded spare track links to hull fronts for extra armor. Infantry squads made improvised suppressors from oil cans and steel wool. Medics developed new tourniquets from parachute cord and tent stakes. Engineers built bridge supports from salvaged railroad ties. None of it was in the manuals. All of it worked. After the 2008 blog post went viral, the military studied this phenomenon. They wanted to know why so many field innovations never reached official channels. The conclusion was bureaucratic. The approval process for new equipment took months, sometimes years. Testing, evaluation, production, distribution. By the time something got approved, the war had moved on. The tactical situation had changed. The innovation was obsolete. Field expedient solutions were immediate. Soldiers identified a problem, solved it with available materials, implemented the fix within hours. No testing, no approval, no bureaucracy, just survival. The military learned from this. Modern doctrine now includes rapid fielding procedures, fast-track approval for soldier-identified innovations, programs that encourage improvisation, forums where troops can share field modifications. The mirror technique, in a way, changed how the Army thinks about innovation. 60 years too late to help Eddie Kowalski, but not too late to help future soldiers. In 2012, a documentary filmmaker named Sarah Chen decided to tell the mirror story properly. A full production, with interviews from surviving tankers, archival footage, CGI recreations. She tracked down Kowalski's son, showed him his father's service record, told him what the mirror meant. Kowalski's son donated his father's medals to the Patton Museum. Not the mirror, which was gone, but the medals remained. A Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, a Presidential Unit citation for the 4th Armored Division's actions at Aurora. The citation mentioned innovative gunnery techniques, but didn't specify what those techniques were. Now people know. Chen's documentary aired on the History Channel in 2013, drawing 3 million viewers. The story resonated not because of the technical details, but because of what it represented. Ordinary soldiers facing impossible odds, using whatever they had, surviving through improvisation and courage. Eddie Kowalski never considered himself a hero, never thought his mirror trick mattered much. He told Whitmore in that 1973 interview, "I was scared. I picked up the first thing I saw. It worked, that's all." But it wasn't all. It was innovation under fire. It was problem solving when death was seconds away. It was the difference between 29 American tankers going home and 29 American tankers dying in French fields. Kowalski went home after the war. He married his high school sweetheart in 1946, had 3 kids, worked 41 years at the same machine shop, coached Little League, volunteered at the VFW, lived a quiet life. He never sought attention, never claimed credit for anything beyond doing his job. Near the end of his life, he told his son, "The mirror was Hayes's mirror. He died holding it. I just picked it up. He's the one who should be remembered." But Hayes is remembered as a name in a casualty report. Kowalski is remembered as the man who changed how American tanks fought, not because he wanted recognition, but because his innovation saved lives, because someone finally wrote it down, because the story mattered. The Battle of Aurora ended in late September 1944. The 5th Panzer Army lost 281 tanks. The 4th Armored Division lost 48. It was the single best kill ratio of any American armored engagement in World War II. Historians credit superior tactics, better positioning, American air support. But the men who were there credit something else. They credit improvisation, they credit desperation, they credit a 22-year-old loader who picked up a broken mirror and refused to die. The dead zone still exists in modern tank design, different optics, different technology, but the fundamental geometry problem persists. Crews train for it now, practicing close-range engagement, using purpose-built equipment. But none of that equipment is a 5-inch hand mirror, held at a 45-degree angle. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones nobody expects. Sometimes survival comes down to seconds, to desperation, to a piece of broken glass. Sometimes the difference between life and death is noticing something everyone else ignored. Eddie Kowalski noticed. 87 German tanks paid the price. That cracked mirror saved more than his life. It saved his crew, his battalion, maybe his entire division. Not because it was sophisticated, because it worked. Because when official solutions failed, soldiers found their own answers. They always have. They always will. The mirror is gone, lost to a landfill. But the lesson remains. Innovation doesn't come from laboratories or engineering departments. It comes from the front lines, From soldiers who refuse to accept that a problem is unsolvable. From men like Eddie Kowalski, who picked up a piece of broken glass and changed history. 4 minutes, 3 panzers, 1 mirror. Sometimes that's all it takes. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans from Texas to Tasmania, from veterans to history enthusiasts. You're part of something special here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.